Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Particular channel here at YouTube, and welcome to, I guess this, I don't know if I can classify this as a EP review or an album review, because of this really isn't that long of a release, but I will get to that. So still, it's another review, and of course, it's another Doomsday's Today Records review, and it's of course one of their most recent cassette releases, of course, from a band called Bush Hog Suicide, and it's titled In a Skeleton Pose. And I guess in many ways it's probably could be either a EP or maybe an album, or maybe a mini album, some sort of that, depending on how you classify this, because it's not really a full length. It's 6 songs on here, and it basically clocks in at which I actually had wrote down right here, which is 20 minutes and 54 seconds. So, again, I'm not very familiar with this band, so this is definitely very new. Bush Hog Suicide, as far as when it comes to looking up any information, this actually was released in 2009, and I think they had either formed sometime in the mid-2000s. Apparently, they had a demo that was released in 2006. Also, they are based out of Mississippi. Though I kind of forgot the town already, but either way, they are based out of Mississippi. So, I guess, right, this is where we'll then get into the actual review. So, again, this is right now, it seems to be the last thing they had released, but with this in a Skeleton Pose, it's 6 songs, like I said, and it clocks in at 20 minutes and 54 seconds. So, since most of the stuff within this label I have heard has usually been within the more noise, at times maybe experimental, almost more grindcore, sludgy, kind of stuff. This, however, on the other hand, the only other thing what was very different for at least as far as musical styles was Silent Storm, because I was more straight up traditional metal. Here, this actually tends to really lean more towards almost the sludge groove, almost at times very doomy and stoner styles of metal. I mean, it's definitely at times, I guess you can say it's groove metal, because of, as far as musical styles, this is almost like at times a cross between, for example, Exhorder and Pantera. And when thinking of Pantera, mostly the 90s era period, mostly, I guess, somewhere between, I wouldn't completely say Cowboys from Hell, but mostly, Vulgar Display of Power, Far Beyond Driven, and of course, The Great Southern Trendkill. Within those albums from Pantera, with of course The Law from Exhorder, and of course Who Mourns for the Morning Star from Exhorder as well. Like those kind of albums, like kind of there, and of course you'll get a bit some of that Black Sabbath tinged influence here and there. And of course, there is at times some thrashier stuff that you'll probably get with this album, or EP, but still, it's very much more Latin, but with more of the very groovier based, sludgy kind of metal. There is at least some faster material here. Cry to Stop Fuck, and songs like Slaying Abel and Naysayer are definitely some of the more faster songs off this one. But again, openers such as Al Batten, The Bones of Peter Curtin, and of course Borgasm definitely tend to be more of the more typical kind of slow, groovy, almost sludgy versatile stoner metal kind of stuff right here. I mean, I can draw some comparisons to High on Fire as well here and there. And as far as, again, the one of the reasons where I can kind of also draw some of those almost Pantera and, or even at times Exhorder is from the vocalist here, which of course is Horace David Frost II. His vocal style is very much somewhere between Kyle Thomas and Phil Anselmo, but at times he tends to really lean more towards Kyle Thomas. In my, from at least as far as vocalist comparisons of Exhorder, or at least, no, Phil Anselmo, Pantera, I definitely hear a lot more Phil Anselmo in his vocal style than at times, but when he does the more, at least the more, I wouldn't say screaming, but when he really at times use the more of those kind of vocal ranges, he tends at times remind me a little bit of Kyle Thomas of Exhorder, but is more slower and more mid-range stuff. He does remind me a little bit of Phil Anselmo in plenty of ways, so that's kind of that. Still, though, for at least these 6 songs and for what this was still a very highly enjoyable release. Again, normally I'm not always into the more groove style. I mean, again, I do dig The Law and Who Mourns for the Morning Star from Exhorder. I do dig some of the more later period of Pantera. And I do like, again, bands like High on Fire, and for example, I do like them. So I wouldn't say this is metalcore. This is far from it. This is far from there. I know one of the band influences was also Hatebreed, but I just hear more Pantera and Exhorder, or at times High on Fire, and at times a little bit of those later period Black Sabbath kind of feel, almost like the 90s period of Black Sabbath, for example. I hear quite a bit of that in here than I do a lot of, let's say, something that you'd expect from, let's say, like metalcore, for example. Even though it does flirt with some of the more faster, almost at times very thrashier stuff here and there on this album, or on a lot of these songs here. So with that, this is definitely a very enjoyable release from Bush Hog Suicide. So here, this is where I'll lead into my rating. I'm actually giving it an 8.50 out of 10. I thought this is it's a very surprisingly enjoyable release. And again, normally I'm not the biggest fan of, let's say, the more later period stuff from Pantera, besides the fact I do dig quite a bit of Cowboys from Hell. But this was still very enjoyable, and I actually kind of liked it. It wasn't always the same thing most of the time. It was still it had a way of at least keeping my attention throughout, even for as short as this release is. It still kept me, wanting to hear more of it and more of it. And by the time you flip in the second side of this cassette, I still kind of dug what I heard. So with that, this was a very highly enjoyable. Again, you can get this through Doomsday's Today Records over at their Bandcamp page, which I will link you to in the description box there. Which within that Bandcamp link, there's of course, since it's on Bandcamp, you can definitely sample it, and if it is something that you'll definitely dig. Again, if you dig bands such as Pantera, Exhorder, High on Fire, and others sort of rule with stoner, groove, sludgy kind of metal bands, I think you'll definitely find something to like with this. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is Every Thrashhead Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.